Is it better to be a small shop that turns a great profit or a large shop that turns a decent profit? What's up guys? Ian Sandusky from Lakewood Machine and Tool back here again from Practical Machinist. Today we're going to get into that question, but before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. Let's get into it. Okay guys, so today we're diving back into the Practical Machinist forum to tackle this question of growth. I like to tackle and dig through the Practical Machinist forums all the time. It's a great source for information. And on this day, I was looking at the shop management and ownership issues subforum. I find it really helpful. It's really good to get exposed to what's going on out there in the industry. You know, especially if you're in a small shop like my own, where you may not be exposed to, what's going on in the big shops in the world right now, what's happening with other small shops on the other side of the country, and so on and so forth. So I was digging through this forum and somebody posted a really, really good thread. They basically just put out the question, what challenges and struggles is your shop dealing with right now? And there was a lot of good discussion. There were a lot of different things guys were talking about, whether they were talking about staffing, whether they were talking about issues with their specific shop owners or with their employees. But there was one trend that I found kind of ran through the entire thing. And it started with one guy, or individual I should say, who commented that his shop was experiencing some growing pains. So from what I understood and kind of gleaned from this, again, I'm only getting a paragraph of the whole story. I'm not getting the big picture. But it sounds like this guy was some kind of supervisor at a shop. And the issue he was experiencing is that his shop had about 30 guys and it was run by two brothers. Two brothers were the owners or the guys who ran it. And that shop had experienced a lot of growth recently. So it sounds like, from what I was understanding, that it was a smaller shop, maybe 10 guys. And over the last few years, they have scaled up to around 30 guys, 20, 30 guys, something like that. And when it comes to dealing with all these employees, the issue is becoming that instead of planning work out for the month or planning work out for the week, so people knew what they were doing, people knew what material had to get ordered, what jobs were coming up, this shop was now basically planning work on an, in his words, hour to hour basis. So at 10 a.m. he may not know what's going on at 11, and he was just commenting that it was getting difficult to deal with. It was getting difficult to manage. And then another guy went and commented and said that his shop kind of had the same issue. And in his circumstance, the guy who owned that shop, or the individual who owned that shop, still kind of insisted that they were a small shop and they were running it like they were a small shop. But reality was that they were not a small shop anymore. They were a medium or maybe even a large sized shop. But the person running it was still running it like it was a small shop, and that was also leading to headaches. He didn't get super specific with it, but basically the mentality was still small, although the reality now was very large. And then one other guy commented, a little bit unrelated, but said, it sounded like he ran a shop, but his shop was growing to the point where he was having a hard time staying on top of being able to order things. So, order material in time, order the right tooling. And he commented that, sometimes he was getting stuck waiting for material to come in the door because it got missed. Or he was double ordering stuff he didn't need because he was losing track because, just the growth was there. He hadn't caught up yet. So I thought this really highlighted an interesting issue. And it's one I feel like we don't talk about enough, and I feel like we should, because it's, probably something we're all gonna have to deal with at some point. And that is growth. Growth as a shop, growth as a business. In my head, I think we all want to be big shops. We all want to grow. We all want more. We want to be able to take on more work. We want to be able to employ more people. And I think that very few shops actually outright think about keeping their shop small. I think a lot of shops, there are some shops that definitely intentionally keep themselves small. There's a lot to be said for having a small shop. Some guys want to be able to go to work from 9 to 5 at their shop that they own, go home, they go to work with their 2 guys or 3 guys, make their money, go home, don't have to think about it for the rest of the weekend. There's nothing wrong with that. There are a lot of advantages to being a small shop. Some companies keep that intentionally, but I think a lot of shops just kind of stumble into whatever kind of size they end up being. So that said, the problem with transitioning to from being a small shop with only a few employees into being a large operation is that it comes with a lot of challenges that maybe don't get addressed quickly enough, or maybe people aren't aware of until they become a problem. I've seen shops grow. I've seen quite a few shops grow, and subsequently I've seen a lot of shops close. And I think that there are some very significant problems that come when a shop grows too quickly. So to go through that, just to show my experience with what I've seen out there, this is not a universal story, but it's a kind of trend I've identified, is that this leads to a kind of cycle. It's a bit of a death spiral. So first, what happens when a shop starts growing too quickly is the hiring standards go down. A lot of work comes in the door, so they need employees to get the work done. If you are in a situation where you need guys and you need guys now, very typically you are not being as choosy, you're not being as picky with finding the right employees. You need a guy who can stand in front of that machine and run it. Or you need a guy with some machining experience to come in and start setting up machines. You're not necessarily waiting for the guy who has the skill level here and the attitude here. Maybe you're taking skill here and attitude here, or maybe you're taking skill here and attitude here, right? Like it's a situation where people need guys on the floor and they need work out the door now. The reason this is a problem is that it ends up with guys being in roles they shouldn't be, and it ends up putting a lot of burden on the existing staff. If the guy doesn't know how to QA parts, do quality control on parts properly, he's gonna need someone to check his work. Now you got a guy who's trying to do his own work, also trying to check someone else's work. Or maybe this guy, isn't reliable. So you are intending for that machine to run 20 hours a week or 40 hours a week. That guy's only coming in, 20 hours a week because he's unreliable. Now you got a machinist trying to run 3 machines when he should really only be focusing on 1 or 2. This kind of problem usually ends up, it's kind of interesting, you don't see the new guys wash out. The problem that happens here is not only do you, start to suffer from issues that way, you see the guys at the top who have been there the longest, the most competent machinists, the most competent managers. They're the ones that you're actually going to see leaving that company, because all of a sudden their job gets way harder, becomes way more difficult. Very rarely will their compensation increase quickly enough, or their conditions fix themselves quickly enough to keep them. So you end up losing the knowledge base and the skill, and now you're left with the rest that you just hired, who maybe shouldn't be working there in the first place. Which leads to the second issue. Lead times go up and quality goes down. Now that there's not enough people working for the company that know what they're doing, or are reliable enough or skilled enough, it's going to become exponentially more difficult to get work out the door that passes QC or gets out in the time frame it should be. For instance, let's say I have a repeating job and I'm in this scenario and I quote out 3-week lead time for this job because that job always takes 3 weeks. Well, now that I've got my skilled guys to set that up and run it, not here anymore, or maybe they're overburdened even if they are here, now that 3-week job can turn into a 5-week job. And if my customer is counting on those parts in 3 weeks, you can only be late a couple of times before that customer is going to go somewhere where they can get the work done in the time frame they need it. Also, because now we have more work going out the door, we have less skilled people working there. We have guys that, their attention is split 5 ways from Sunday. There's going to be parts going out the door that should never make it out the door, that should have gotten caught by QC, or they're out of spec. So now the customer is going to get bad parts in a later time frame. This happens all the time, guys. I've been on the receiving end of this. When you've seen a company go buy a new building, hire a bunch more people, you're like, oh great, this is gonna be perfect. They have so much more staff, I'm gonna get my parts faster. And now they take longer and the parts are wrong when they show up. This is something I've seen time and time again, and I'm sure you guys have as well. So the problem with this is now you are going to lose the good customers. You're gonna lose the big money customers, you're gonna lose the customers that are a little more tolerant when you have issues. So now you're going to be stuck with a lower quality of customer that's willing to take late work, that maybe have more lax quality standards. So they'll take the worst parts because they don't really care, because they're You know, they're a company that's operating here as opposed to your old customers that were operating here. Which leads to the third point. Now the company gets in financial trouble. Because the customers this company has are now lower quality, you know, as Ken Parent said in his video, he was detailing not that he has lower quality customers, but an issue he was having was dealing with terms going from net 30 to net 60. So instead of getting paid in 30 days, he's getting paid in 60 days. You know, we've done videos on this before where this is a scenario that a lot of guys find themselves in. And while even good customers can have cash flow issues or drag you along, you know, not every customer that takes a minute to pay is a bad customer, by no means. But if you're now dealing with a lower quality customer, the chances of you getting paid on time is also much lower. Your rate per hour you're making on those jobs is also going to be much lower. So you are now going to start experiencing cash flow issues. You know, if you have to pay for your material in 30 days, but you're not getting paid from your customer until 45, 60 days, now you're not going to be able to pay your supplier. Now your supplier is not going to ship to you, so now you got to go find a new supplier. And this is really where the death spiral starts to kick in and starts to really spin, and it's incredibly difficult to pull yourself out of the situation once you're in it. You know, they don't call it a death ladder because you can just walk yourself right back up it. It's a spiral. You're falling and you are out of control. I've seen this more times than I can count, either firsthand or I've heard the stories. It's this cycle of exponential growth that's not sustainable, so it leads to huge pullbacks. So now the company that experiences growth, they have to lay people off. They have a worse customer base. They're in a weaker position than if they had never done that in the first place. And the company either closes or it downsizes or it ceases operations in one complete area of its expertise because it's just trying to survive. So how can we as a manufacturing business avoid this trap? Because there are companies that grow very successfully, and there are a lot of companies that have been around for a long time that expand. It's a fact. The first thing I would point out as a strategy and something you need to consider when it comes to growth is being intentional in your business and growth plan. Too many companies, in my opinion, sleepwalk into growth. They truck along with 5 or 6 employees for a couple decades or 10 years or whatever it may be. Then all of a sudden work picks up or they get the big order. So now they have to react and go and hire their people and buy all their machines and get a lease on a big fancy building. But it was never really part of the plan. Instead, it's always better to have an intentional growth plan and really focus on sticking to that plan. To share my own experience here at Lakewood, we have been growing over the last 5 years, even though we've had some down years and some up years. We have been growing. We've been adding machines, we've been adding employees. But we have been adding machines and employees about as slowly and in as controlled a fashion as I can stomach. There are times that I wish I could hire 5 guys tomorrow, put 5 new machines on the floor, buy another building, and just take on every job that's coming my way. Because we all have that kind of predilection towards growth. We want to take everything, we want it all, greed. The fact is, the faster you expand, the more overhead you have, the more issues you're going to have to deal with. By growing in a very controlled fashion, what we do is, we have a capacity. We have, what do we have now? 6 vertical mills and a lathe and wire EDM machine. So what we do is we grow and then we wait for the work to fill it up. And once we're at the point where our capacity is at that red line, we are maybe not on the bleeding edge of being late because that's not helpful, but once we feel like we have hit our capacity and we have been consistently busy in filling that capacity with our staff and with our equipment for a protracted amount of time, then it's time to add another machine or try to hire on a new person. We're very avoidant, or at least I'm very avoidant, to putting in 4 machines tomorrow, because all that's going to do is open up a lot more headaches that I may not be prepared for. This also keeps us from getting into a situation where we are overly reliant on one big customer. I've said it before in this video, I've said it before in previous videos. One of the most dangerous things you can do is be tethered to one big customer. So if you are adding a bunch of capacity for one big customer, What happens when that big customer slows down? You know, we've had that situation here before, years ago, where we had one big customer, they slowed down, they stopped shipping as much product, and then we had to go and figure out, well, what do we do with this capacity? How do I keep these people employed? How do I keep paying benefits on guys that, you know, aren't being able to do work? It's a terrible situation. I don't like laying people off. We don't want to do it. So by trying to keep intentional in that, it keeps us from getting into that situation with one big customer. I will say that you do need to be agile and you do need to be willing to take some risks. You know, business is risk, guys. Something could happen tomorrow that puts me out of business that I can't control. So you need to be willing to take risks when the work starts coming in and make that calculated risk to add more capacity, to get another lease, to buy a bigger building. But you need to be able to manage that risk as much as possible. The second point I'd like you to keep in mind is that more isn't always better. There's a definite benefit to being big. You know, there's that old saying that quantity is a quality all its own, and I don't feel like it applies very well to machining. But there are a lot of big benefits that come to being big. You know, big companies exist for a reason because they make a lot of money. They spread a lot of money out in their communities, hopefully. You know, big companies exist for a reason. There are a lot of benefits to being large. But if you're a larger company, there are a lot of headaches and considerations that come along. Think about it. If you are a company with 100 people, all of a sudden you probably don't just need more machinists, you need HR. You need probably dedicated salespeople. You need janitors. You probably need someone handling your company benefits plan. The bigger you get, the more roles you need to fill that aren't even directly related to making parts. Now it's related to running a business. And some companies will find that beneficial and want to take that on. Other companies, like I said, kind of fall into it and then it becomes an afterthought and a headache. And some companies say, do you know what? I like the size we are. We are going to try to intentionally stay this size. There are a lot of benefits to being big. There are also a lot of benefits to being small. So really keeping in your mind that constant growth is not always the best thing is at least helpful to think about. I was listening to a podcast the other day that raised an interesting question. I forget who it was. It might have been Guy Raz, who said, is it better to be Uber, who is a huge multinational but still hasn't been profitable, or is it better to be the corner grocery store that makes $100,000 a year in profit? There's a lot more that goes into it than that, obviously, but it's an interesting thought experiment to keep in mind. Thirdly and lastly, I would say the biggest thing you need to keep in mind is evaluating your plan and readjusting your plan frequently. Much like the first point, having a plan is fantastic, sticking to it is fantastic, but blindly sticking to a plan without ever going back and reevaluating it is just as bad as not having a plan to begin with. Data is really going to be your friend here. You know, if you have an ERP system, it makes it very easy. If not, you're going to have a bit of work to do. But going back frequently and actually crunching the numbers. What is our rate per hour? What is our actual overhead? What are we spending on material? What are we spending on company benefits? What are we spending on, you know, our guys' paid time off? Going back and actually crunching those numbers frequently and staying on top of them and making the necessary adjustments to keep yourself on the track you want is going to be important. You know, are we taking on too much work? Is our lead time getting longer because we are taking on too much work? Do you know what? Do we actually need to grow a bit because at this level we're making X, but if I get our sales up to here, now I can employ 2 more people and our working conditions are going to be better because these guys are going to be less stressed out. These are all things to keep in mind. And if you are constantly staying on top of it, or at least you make a plan to say, every 3 months, do a formal review of my business, or every 6 months, I'm going to sit down with my 2 supervisors and we're going to hammer out what needs to happen. It's going to keep you on a track and keep you from blindly stumbling into either shrinking or growing. It keeps everything very intentional. So keeping that in mind is going to be important. Anyways, guys, I hope this has been helpful. In the comments below, I would like you guys to give some of your best strategies for growth or share some of the issues you're having when it comes to growing or finding guys or finding work. What are you struggling with right now? I would love to hear in the comments below. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. Thank you very much for watching, guys. You take care.